When I think back to that day, it's like watching a scene from someone else's life. I remember stepping into the lodge, feeling the familiar chaos of a family reunion wash over me. The red checked tablecloths, the buffet trays steaming, kids darting around with juice boxes. It was the same as every year. But something inside me was different this time. For the first time in forever, I let myself hope. Maybe it was the way people smiled when I said hello, or how someone offered me a glass of sangria as soon as I walked in. Maybe it was seeing my dad at the far table, laughing like he hadn't in years. I thought to myself, maybe this year will be okay. Not perfect, but okay. Maybe this year no one will end up crying in the car. My sister Marin was there too. She floated around the room in her white sundress, barefoot like she was in some kind of commercial. She was carrying a frame wrapped in tissue paper with a little ribbon. I didn't pay much attention to it. I had brought a gift myself, a reservation at that fancy French restaurant our parents always talked about but never went to. I slipped it under their dinner plate, imagining their surprise when they found it. The plan was simple: quiet gestures, shared food, a few awkward hugs, nothing more. But then Marin stood up. Someone handed her a microphone and she laughed. This sweet little laugh like she hadn't been planning it all along. "Sorry to interrupt," she began, clapping her hands like she was calling a classroom to order. She said she had a little something for our amazing parents and handed the frame to our mom. It was a collage of photos, vacations, birthdays, random selfies. But there was no space for me, not even on the edges. My mom blinked at the collage, then smiled. She stood up, raised her glass, and said, "This is the daughter who's always loved us." A few people clapped, someone let out a little "aw." And then she added louder, as if to make sure everyone heard, "The other one, she's never lifted a finger." The room fell silent. Someone coughed. A fork dropped. I could feel the confusion, the awkward shift. I didn't say anything, didn't cry, didn't ask what she thought I'd been doing all these years. I just picked up my bag, walked to the door, and left. No drama, no scene, just this bone-deep clarity that if I stayed another second, the sound of everyone not standing up for me would be burned into my memory forever. The drive home was 2 hours of silence. No music, just the dark highway and the endless list forming in my head. How many times had I wired them money? How many bills had I paid just to help them through a rough month? How many birthdays had I missed to work overtime so they could keep their house? 9 years of covering their mortgage and bills, only to be erased in a single moment. But I kept smiling, because what else was there to do? The day started like any other, and I didn't expect it to end with me stepping out into the night, leaving everything behind. I had reached a point where I couldn't take it anymore. After I walked out, I wasn't expecting anyone to notice. It's funny how, for a moment, I thought maybe they'd all just carry on without a second thought. But I was wrong. The next morning, my phone was a beacon of chaos with 38 missed calls. It was overwhelming waking up to that barrage of notifications. The call started rolling in at 6:17 a.m., and I was baffled by the sudden urgency. It was as if my absence had sparked some kind of panic that hadn't been there the night before. The first few calls were from my mom, which wasn't surprising, but it quickly escalated. My dad chimed in with a few of his own, and then Marin. 14 calls from Marin. It was almost comical. Marin, who barely reached out unless she needed something, now acted like a telemarketer desperate to make a sale. I made coffee, settled on the kitchen counter, and just stared at my phone, watching it light up over and over again. I wasn't in a hurry to answer. Part of me was curious about what they'd say, how they'd justify this sudden interest. Eventually, I gave in and picked up. Marin's voice came through, relieved and anxious. She stumbled through her words, expressing concern about my whereabouts. I took a sip of my coffee, feeling oddly detached from the situation. I assured her I was fine, but her tone shifted quickly. "They were stuck," she said. "They couldn't get on their little sightseeing cruise because it was canceled. Something about a declined card." I felt a smirk tugging at my lips. Of course, it was my card on file, and I'd canceled it. Silence hung in the air when I told her that. I could almost see her blinking in disbelief through the phone. "But why?" she finally asked. It was a loaded question, and I took a moment before responding. I explained without any heat that maybe it was time to make true what Mom had announced to everyone about me never lifting a finger. I canceled the whole trip, the lodging too. Their cabin was under my name after all. They didn't have a way back, and I suggested she pay for their tickets. Her voice wavered, admitting she didn't have the money. I shrugged it off, telling her they would understand since she's the daughter who always loved them. And then I hung up. It wasn't satisfaction I felt, not in the way people might expect. There was no triumphant feeling, no rush of victory. It was just a calm, a stillness that settled over me. 6 years of quietly managing their expenses, covering the mortgage, the bills, groceries, even the dentist visits that seemed to crop up with surprising regularity. It was a silence that felt like the most honest reaction I could muster. They never really knew the extent of what I did for them, and I never felt the need to parade it. I didn't need to be showered with praises or acknowledgement. What I craved, more than anything, was to be seen, to be valued for who I was. But it seemed a framed photo collage from Marin held more weight in their eyes than everything I'd done. The worst part? I wasn't even surprised. Mom's toast, the one where she lifted her glass and toasted Marin as the daughter who always loved them, didn't come out of left field. It was the culmination of a dynamic that had been brewing for years. Marin was always the vibrant one, the creative spirit who dazzled them with her artistic gestures. She made them mix CDs and glittery handwritten cards that they adored. Meanwhile, I was the stable one, the one who secured a good job and moved a couple of hours away. I was the one who managed my student loans and helped Mom refinance the mortgage when Dad couldn't bring himself to ask. They reached out to Marin for visits and called me when they needed something fixed or paid for. Marin gave them her time. I gave them financial stability. Guess which one they valued more? It wasn't always this skewed. Growing up, they saw us as two different but equally special individuals. But that changed when I turned 24 and started shouldering the financial responsibilities they couldn't manage. It was as if my ability to provide financially overshadowed everything else I was or could be. You know, there was a time when I thought things would be different. I always believed that one day, everything would fall into place, and I'd finally feel like I belonged. But as the years went by, I realized I was just waiting for something that was never going to come. Marin, my sister, she always seemed to be searching for herself. First, she tried acting, then teaching yoga, then making jewelry. It felt like she was always between jobs, never quite settling on anything. Meanwhile, I was the one who stepped in to help my parents when things got tough. I even paid their property tax once so they wouldn't lose the house. I thought that would mean something. I never asked for anything in return. I didn't expect them to shower me with gratitude or acknowledge my help publicly. But there I was, standing at the reunion, listening to my mother talk about Marin as if she had accomplished something extraordinary. It was like I was invisible, like I didn't even exist. Everyone seemed to nod in agreement and no one questioned it. That was what hurt the most. It was as if they all believed Marin had always been there for them, while I had done nothing. When I got home that night, something inside me snapped. It wasn't anger or spite, it was a moment of clarity. If they couldn't see me, if I was truly invisible to them, then I wasn't going to continue supporting them financially. I opened my laptop and started canceling everything. The auto transfers, standing orders, mortgage support, gone. I cut off the groceries, the gas card I paid off every month, and closed the account I used to wire them money whenever their furnace broke down. Even the dentist bill that was due the next day. I let it slide. It wasn't out of revenge. It was just a realization that I didn't need to pay for the privilege of being ignored. I could have called them, explained my decision, but they made their choice in front of everyone. I decided they could deal with the consequences on their own. The next day, I didn't hear from them. Not a single call, not a single message. It was almost amusing, like they thought I was just having a little tantrum, as if I was a child upset over something trivial, not a grown woman who had been erased in front of 52 people after supporting them financially for 6 years. By Monday, they were back home, and I only knew because my dad's Facebook updated its location. "Great weekend with family. We are so blessed," he posted. No mention of me, of course. Still, nothing from them. I imagined them walking through the door and noticing something was off. Maybe the cable wasn't working, or the thermostat was acting up. Perhaps the groceries didn't arrive, and the mortgage payment hadn't gone through. I pictured my mom checking her phone, seeing the bills unpaid, the alerts popping up one by one. It was like watching dominoes fall, quietly and inevitably. I knew they must have called the bank because I got a notification about an attempted login from a new device on the joint account they used for household expenses. It locked itself after the second attempt. That night, around 9:30, there was a knock on my door. I didn't open it right away. I just stood there, back against the wall, staring at the door, listening. Then I heard my mother's voice. "Lauren." Opening the door that day was like unveiling a chapter of my life I wasn't sure I wanted to read. She stood there looking worn out, like life had taken its toll. No makeup, hair disheveled by the wind, wearing one of those cardigans she pulls on when she's trying to seem vulnerable. Behind her, my dad stood with his arms crossed, not in anger, just present. She asked if they could come in. I didn't let them. I suggested we talk right there on the porch. She seemed embarrassed, glancing around as if worried about what the neighbors might think. She started talking about wanting to clear the air, but I was already on edge. I couldn't help but think of what happened at the reunion. That moment replayed in my mind like a broken record. I asked her if she meant the part where she stood in front of everyone and said I had never lifted a finger. She tried to explain it wasn't meant the way it sounded, but I couldn't shake off how clear it was. "It was a moment," she said, trying to justify that Marin had just given them a photo. Everyone was watching, and apparently, Marin was having a tough time. That's her constant state, always trying, never quite there. My mom tried to defend her, saying she just wanted to do something nice. That's when it hit me. They decided to announce Marin as the good daughter, and I was left wondering what I was in their eyes. An afterthought, maybe? She said it wasn't fair. I couldn't hold back. The unfairness was in having spent over $150,000 on their bills over the years and being told I hadn't done anything. The look on her face, the way my dad blinked, it felt like I had finally dropped a weight I'd been carrying. The number was real and I told them so. I'd done the math, from mortgage payments to groceries, surprise dental bills, even paying off Marin's credit card when stress had her in a chokehold. It all added up. My dad finally spoke, saying they never asked me to do any of it, and he was right. They didn't ask, but they let it happen, year after year. The silence that followed was heavy. My mom looked away, focusing on a plant beside the door, while my dad seemed like he wanted to disappear. Then she asked if this was about money. I told her no, it was about being made to feel invisible and them expecting me to keep pretending I wasn't. They didn't think I'd take it so personally, which made me laugh. Here we were, after all. She softened her tone, a shift I'd seen before, saying they just wanted to fix things, that they loved me. I told her maybe she should have expressed that instead of rewriting our history with a speech and a photo frame. She nodded as if she got it, but then she brought up Marin, saying she didn't mean to hurt me. It wasn't Marin's words. It was hers. More silence followed. I eventually told them if they came seeking help with the house, they were talking to the wrong daughter now. I closed the door after that, feeling a mix of emotions I couldn't quite untangle. 2 days passed before Marin showed up. She rang the bell twice, impatient, like she was in a hurry. When I opened the door, she didn't wait for an invitation, just walked in like it was a decade ago, and she was borrowing my shoes without asking. She asked if I knew what I was doing to our parents. I shut the door calmly, told her she'd have to be more specific. She said they were panicking because the mortgage was due in 3 days, and they didn't have enough. I was surprised they didn't expect this. I raised an eyebrow and asked if she thought I would warn them after Mom stood up in front of everyone and said I'd never done anything for them. Marin rolled her eyes, saying Mom got caught up in the moment. I suggested she let the moment pay the bills then. She accused me of being spiteful, but I corrected her, saying I was just being factual. They all declared I never helped, so I was simply adjusting my behavior to match their perception. Marin seemed taken aback, blinking, and I reminded her she lived with them, rent-free. I guess I've always been the one who keeps everything together, the silent supporter, the backbone that no one really notices until it's no longer there. That was my role in the family, and I took it on without much fuss. But it gets to a point where you start asking yourself, is it really worth it? Am I supposed to keep doing this forever? It started with the little things, like covering the utilities when they couldn't, or stepping in to help whenever there was a financial hiccup. At first, it felt like the right thing to do. They were my parents, after all. But over time, it became expected of me. It wasn't gratitude that I received, but rather an assumption that I would always be there to fix things. Meanwhile, I watched as my sister, Marin, did what she wanted, when she wanted, without a care in the world about the responsibilities that seemed to be solely mine. Marin was always good at making things look effortless, like her life was a series of beautiful collages and self-care Sundays. It felt unfair. She was the favorite, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. And every time I tried to voice my frustrations, it was met with dismissive comments or awkward silences. Like that one time when they needed help and I pointed out that Marin should step up. I was met with silence, and then that flicker of doubt in Marin's eyes. It was a small victory, but not one that brought any real satisfaction. That night, I slept well for the first time in a long while. Not because we had reached an understanding or because they had finally appreciated my efforts, but because, for once, I had drawn a line. I had told them that I wasn't going to be the one holding everything up anymore. I was finally letting someone else take responsibility, even if it was just for a moment. It wasn't long after that they decided to go public with our family issues. My mom, of course, was the one to start it. She posted a smiling family photo from our reunion with a caption that read, "Family means everything, even when some people forget that." It was a passive-aggressive jab, and everyone who saw it knew exactly who it was aimed at. The comments rolled in with people taking sides and speculating about what had happened. It was frustrating. They didn't need to say my name. The implication was clear. Yet, no one asked me about my side of the story, about what I'd been doing all these years. They didn't question why the family trips and dinners stopped when I decided to step back. I watched as distant relatives chimed in with their opinions, fueled by half-truths and assumptions. It was maddening, but I stayed quiet. I let them talk because, honestly, I was tired. Tired of explaining myself, tired of justifying my actions. But when someone commented about me being cold and uninvolved, and my mom liked it, I snapped. I couldn't just let that slide. So I decided to respond in the only way I knew how, with facts. I posted screenshots of bank statements, confirmation emails, wire transfers, every financial contribution I'd made over the years. It was all there, laid out for everyone to see, almost $140,000 in total spent on the family, yet they dared to say I'd never lifted a finger. I didn't add any commentary. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke for themselves. The reaction was swift. By morning, the original post was gone, along with a few others that tried to defend it. And then the texts started coming in from family members who had no idea about the extent of my support. They were apologetic, shocked even. But from my mom, there was nothing. Silence. And from Marin, a simple message. "We need to talk." When I saw her next, she looked different, like reality had finally caught up with her. She asked if we could talk, but I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. It wasn't an easy decision, but I needed space, time to process everything. It was time for them to realize that I wasn't going to be their safety net anymore. It's hard to know where to start when everything feels so tangled up inside. I'm sitting here in front of this camera trying to make sense of it all. I guess it all began when Marin, my sister, came over one day, and it felt like a punch in the gut. She just blurted it out, as if she were announcing some tragic event. "A job," she said with this heaviness in her voice like it was the end of the world. "Welcome to adulthood, right?" She was serious, and so was I, but it was the way she said it that hit me. She dropped this bag on the counter, and I couldn't help but notice what was in it. Canned soup, ramen, some off-brand paper towels, no fresh food. Nothing that spoke of a healthy meal. And then she said it, almost like she was confessing something terrible. They told her she had to help because I was gone, and apparently, I was the one who made everything work. Her voice cracked when she said it. It was like she realized something in that moment, something she hadn't admitted before. She tried to backtrack, said it wasn't like that, but I could see it. They were struggling, and somehow they had chosen me. It was at a family reunion of all places. Marin standing there in front of everyone. Our mom called me the daughter who'd always loved them. It caught me off guard. I was just trying to be nice, trying to keep the peace. I didn't know Mom was going to say that, and I didn't know how to react. Marin didn't correct her. I guess she liked it, hearing that. But then she looked at me, and I saw how tired she was. How thin she'd become. She wasn't sleeping, wasn't taking care of herself. I wanted to tell her to try harder, but instead I just closed the door behind her. The next time, they all came together. My mom, my dad, Marin. They looked like kids waiting outside the principal's office, unsure and a little ashamed. They stood there on the porch, and I could see them through the window. I opened the door, but didn't invite them in. My mom spoke first, and her voice sounded so small, older than I remembered. She said they were sorry. My dad didn't say anything. Marin just looked exhausted, not angry, just done. My mom went on, saying they shouldn't have said what they said. It was stupid, she admitted. They didn't think. But I knew they had thought about it. They just didn't think it would cost them anything. Marin chimed in, saying it was just how Mom gets sometimes. She admitted that she liked hearing it, but they didn't mean it. Not really, my mom added. I nodded, but it didn't matter anymore. They had made their choice, and now they had to understand the consequences. I told them they needed to understand. They had told everyone at that reunion that I'd never lifted a finger for the family, while I was still paying their mortgage, their bills. My name was on their insurance, their utilities, everything. I'd paid $147,000 to be erased, and now they had to live with that. They were silent. My mom swallowed, my dad looked away, and Marin just stared at her shoes. I waited for a fight, some tearful plea, but there was nothing. Just 3 people who finally realized what they'd lost. I told them I wasn't angry anymore, just done. And then I closed the door. A few months passed, and I heard Marin moved out. She lasted longer than I thought she would, but it was too much for her. The bills, the errands, the late-night calls. It all caught up to her. She found a smaller place farther away and didn't leave a forwarding address. Not long after, my parents sold their house, the one I helped them keep afloat for 9 years, the one they said I'd never lifted a finger to save. They took what they could get and downsized fast. Now they're in a rental with thin walls and flickering lights. I know because my cousin drove past. I never went back, not because I'm angry, but because I'm done. Some people think family is forever, but others learn the hard way. It's conditional. I often wonder if I went too far or not far enough, but that's not for me to decide.